Okay, today, even though I want to continue what we were doing on Monday, I just feel that hopefully we'll get to that before we're done. But it's not appropriate to go into Rosh Hashanah without having reviewed the classic Torah reading for Rosh Hashanah, which is the story of the Akeidah, the very emotional, complicated story of the near binding of Isaac. And what I'd like to do is read it with everybody today. And when we read it, we'll read it with the commentary of Rashi. So if people have questions as we read it with Rashi's commentary, you can certainly raise your hand, and we'll stop the discussion to take your questions. But I feel that it's just not appropriate to enter into the holidays without having spiritually prepared by reading this passage. So let's go. It's Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. And it was after these matters, Abraham. God tested Abraham. Vayomer elav Abraham. Vayomer hineni. And God said to Abraham, he said to him, Abraham, and Abraham said, I am here. Let's go with what Rashi says here. Rashi says, Achar advar ma'ela, yesh mi rabotenu omrim. So after what matters? That's the first question of the Akeidah. What's the context in which this story is taking place? So Rashi says the context is two possible. Rashi offers two suggestions. First, it was after something that's not written in the text. Achar mi tvarav shel Satan. After the words of Satan. Now, Rashi doesn't understand after the matters, but he says there were specific words that Satan said. Shayim mekatreg. Even though we read it as Abraham was amazing, there were people who were accusing. Satan was accusing Abraham. Now I said people. Satan's not a person. Satan's an angel, or maybe it's not even an angel. Maybe it's an idea or a concept. Satan was accusing Abraham, and he was saying, Mikol Suda She'asa Avram. Now, from every meal that Abraham made, what do you mean from every meal that Abraham made? Well, if you go back to chapter 21, verse 8, it states that on the day that Isaac grew older and was weaned, Abraham made a party. And it doesn't say that he brought a sacrifice to God at that party. So he says, from the entire meal that Abraham made, God didn't bring a bull or a ram. Now, Abraham didn't bring to God a bull or a ram. God made a big party, and he didn't bring a bull or a ram. So God said to him, God said to him, did you make this banquet for any reason other than his son? Basically, God is going to prove that Satan is wrong. How is he going to prove Satan is wrong? He says, why do you think he made this banquet? Because he loves his son so much. So therefore, so you're saying Abraham loves his son more than anything in the world. That's not true, because he loves God more than he loves his son. So if I would say to Abraham, slaughter your son before me, he would not refrain from doing it. So according to this approach, that the purpose of the Akeidah came to prove that Abraham does not love his own son more than he loves Isaac, because we might have thought that Abraham, in fact, loves his child more than he loves God. And so we're being told that that's not the case, that his love for God takes precedence over his love for his son. And that's why he would sacrifice his own son if that's what God told him to do. That's the first approach. After the words of the Satan who was accusing him, that he at his own party did not make sufficient praise to God. Hold on 1 second. Just give me 1 second. But now we see Rashi offers a second explanation. What's the second explanation that Rashi offers? What does it mean after these things? Rashi says, Achar dvarav shel Yishmael. After the words of Yishmael. What are the words of Yishmael? That Yishmael said the following: Hayim mitpaer al Yitzchak. That Yishmael was taunting Isaac. He was saying, Shemal ben Shlosh Esrei. He's saying, I was circumcised at 13 years old, and he didn't object, whereas you were only circumcised at 8 days old. So basically, he was saying that my circumcision was a much greater test than you. So Amrlo Yitzchak said to him, you're trying to frighten me by saying that you shown more dedication to God with one limb. If God would tell me, sacrifice yourself before me, I would not refrain from doing it. So we see from here, let me just summarize. According to this, the matter, the Akeidah, was a test of Isaac. That it was after the words of Ishmael who was taunting Isaac. And Isaac says, if God would ask me to sacrifice myself, I'd sacrifice my entire being. According to this, the test of the Akeidah was a test of Isaac. So we see that this is a fundamental question, which Rashi brings out at the beginning two completely different approaches, which the commentaries to this day struggle. Who was the main test of the Akeidah? Was it a test of Abraham? According to the first approach, Abraham had to prove himself to God. And according to the second approach, it was a test of Isaac, that Isaac had to prove himself to God. And those are the two distinct approaches. It's a test of Abraham because Abraham, is he willing to give up that in the world which he loves the most after God? Test of Isaac, is he willing to give up himself? So the great Hasidic masters say, of course, it's not a test of Abraham, because Abraham heard the command straight from God. If anybody would hear the command straight from God, well, of course they would do it. But Isaac didn't hear the command, so therefore it wasn't as great a test of Abraham as it was of Isaac. On the other hand, you could say it was a test really of Abraham and not of Isaac. What did Isaac actually do? Isaac was passive through the whole scene. He just had to lay down there, whereas Abraham is the one who had to take the action. And that's perhaps an approach why you might say it's a test, a greater test of Abraham or a greater test of Isaac. And then Rashi says on the next part of the verse, it says, and Abraham said, Hineni, here I am. What does that mean? Kachi aniyatam shel chasidim. This is what the pious respond. This is how the pious respond. Was shown anavahu. It's an expression of humility. Was shown zimun, an expression of readiness to do the bidding of one addressing them. Meaning to say that he's saying, Abraham is saying, Hineni, I'm here to serve God. So now we come to verse 2. That was all just first verse. Then we come to the second verse. Vayomer, and Abraham, and God said to Abraham, Kach na es bincha es yechidcha asher ahavta es Yitzchak melech lecha eretz haMoriah v'aleu shamu Allah al achad ha'arim asher amari lecha. So now he says, take now please your son, your only son, the one whom you love, Isaac, and you shall go to the Mount Moriah and bring him up there for an olah on one of the mountains that I said to you. Let's see what Rashi says here too. Rashi dissects this verse. First of all, Rashi says, Kachna, take now, ein na el lashon bakasha. The word na is an expression of please. Meaning, God says to Avram, "V'vakasha mimcha, amod li b'zeh nisayon." I want you to please pass this test. God is begging Abraham to pass the test. Shelo yomru harishonot lo yeh b'hem mamish. Now you shouldn't say that the first tests were not substantial. Meaning to say as follows. This is a very powerful reading. That Abraham, the Mishnah Avot, Pirkei Avot says that Abraham had 10 tests. Rashi in his commentary to Avos lists the 10 tests. I'll get to them in a second. But according to this reading of Rashi, and it's significant that we read this on Rosh Hashanah, when God challenges us, God is our biggest cheerleader. God is begging for us to pass the test. You know, some teachers that when they gave us a test in school, they wanted us to succeed more than anything. Because if we succeeded, they looked good. So according to this reading, Hashem wants Avram to succeed. And of course, Avram wants all of his children to succeed. So God is giving us this test with the hopes that we'll succeed. What were the 10 tests of Abraham, according to Rashi? So the first test was that Nimrod wanted to kill Abraham, and Abraham had to hide underground for 13 years. Now, this is not in the text of the Torah. Rashi's 10 tests are not in the text of the Torah. This one was not in the Torah. The number 2 test was Nimrod cast Avram into a fiery furnace because Avram destroyed his idols. That also was not written in the text of the Torah. The third test was that God exiled Abraham from his birthplace. Okay, that's in the Torah. Number 4, God brought a famine after he went to Canaan. The 5th test was Sarah was taken by Paro and Avimelech. He counts that as two separate one test, even though it happened 2 separate incidents. The 6th test was that Avram had to wage war against the 4 kings. The 7th test was that Avram was shown at the Brit Bein Abitarim, at the covenant, that his descendants were going to be subjugated for 400 years. The 8th test was that Avram had to circumcise himself and his son. The 9th test was to send away Yishmael and Hagar. And the 10th test was to sacrifice Isaac. And these are the 10 tests that appear that according to Rashi. Rambam disagrees with Rashi's count. Ramban disagrees with Rashi's count. But at least we should know what Rashi's count was. So now it says, take now your son, your only son, the one whom you love. Why the triple language? Rashi says, and Morlo, when Avram heard this, when he heard him say, take your son, he said, Shnei vanim yeshli. He says, I have 2 sons. So then he said to him, et yechidka, you're only one. So Abraham responds, I don't have an only one son. Zeh yechidu imo. Zeh yechidu imo. Each one is the only one of their mother, Yishmael and Isaac. Amalo asher ahavta, which you love. Amalo shneim ani ohev. I love both of them. Amalo Yitzlak. So take Yitzlak. So first of all, there's a very powerful question. Now, let me get to that in a moment. Why did God just not say take Isaac at the beginning? So Rashi tells us a fundamental idea, a practical bit of knowledge, real world bit of knowledge. Why did he not say Isaac at the beginning? He didn't want Abraham to get too upset. He had to build up to it. If it came to him right away, then he would get disoriented. He would become agitated. So the first reason why he didn't say Isaac right away is because Abraham would have gotten upset. You need to build up to it. And the second reason is you build up to it to give him reward for each and every word. But it's also very clear from here that Abraham, according to Rashi, has great love for Yishmael. He has great love. He says, the one whom I love. The one whom I love. He says that straight out. He says straight out, the one whom I love. And so therefore, that's a powerful idea that lest we think that he doesn't have this love for Yishmael, we're being told, the one whom I love. So that's a very, very powerful idea. Okay, so then he says, take him to the land. You shall go to Eretz Moriah, to Mount Moriah. Where is this Mount Moriah that Isaac is being brought to? Rashi tells us this is Yerushalayim. He's being brought to Jerusalem. Mount Moriah is Jerusalem. Chaim b'divrei hayamim. Also in Chronicles it says, "Note at Beit Hashem b'Yerushalayim, to build the house of God in Jerusalem." Bahara Moriah, Mount Moriah. So Mount Moriah is a reference to Jerusalem. What else happens in Mount Moriah? That's where the temple will be built. That's what it says there. That's what Rashi is saying. Rabbeinu Pirshu, why is it called Moriah? Al Shem Shemisham Moriah Tzali Yisrael. It's called Mount Moriah because that's where the teachings, the instruction went out to the world. Unclos Torgamo, Unclos explains that why is it called Mount Moriah? Al Shem Avodat HaKetoret, because that's where the Ketoret incense took place. Sheyesh bo more ne'erd u'sha'ar b'samim. They have all this more. They have the spices and other spices. So two reasons why it's called Mount Moriah. If anybody asks you, why is the Temple Mount called Mount Moriah? Either it comes from the word to teach, Moriah, to teach, or else it comes from the word for spices. But we see from here, that Isaac was, the Akeidah took place on Mount Moriah. And to this day, you could see the stone where he was brought, but you'd have to first recite the Quran to get into it, because it's controlled under the golden dome, and so therefore you're not able. Jews aren't really supposed to go in there anyway, because it's the place of the Kodesh Kodashim. So really, only we'd have to be purified from the red heifer before going into the actual Beit HaMikdash's territory. The Temple Mount is a separate question, whether Jews can go in, and I could talk to you about that if you're interested, but that's a separate question. And then he says, Va'aleu sham le'olah. This is one of the most important phrases in this entire passage. Many people will say, how could God command Abraham to slaughter Isaac? So Rashi tells us straight out, Rashi is a very powerful answer to this question, and his answer is God never told Abraham to slaughter Isaac. He never told him that. Rashi says, Lo omar lo shechateyu. He never says to slaughter him. God did not desire Isaac to be slaughtered. God commanded Abraham, bring him up the mountain, Almanas Lasoto Oa, to make him an Oa. Meaning to say, we're going to give Isaac the status of an Oa. Meaning to say that he can't leave the land of Israel anymore. He has the status of like a korban, but not to be slaughtered. Meaning to say, I want you to dedicate or consecrate your child. But God never says to slaughter him. Never says to slaughter him. That's what Rashi points out. So if anybody says, how could God have said slaughter Isaac? Never says. That's what Rashi says. It never says to slaughter him. So, Umishaeleu, and once he brought him up the mountain, Amaro Horideu, God said, take him down, but do not slaughter him. Do not slaughter him. So this is the misreading of the passage, that many people think, oh, God told Abraham to slaughter Isaac. He never said that. He told him to sanctify him for an Olah. Va'aleu sham le'olah, bring him up for an Olah on one of the mountains that I will tell you. So what does he say on one of the mountains that I will tell you? What does he mean there? Rashi says, Echad ha'arim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mateh tzadikim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu delays the righteous. The righteous have to wait. It's called delayed gratification. Hashem makes the righteous anxious about the details. Only afterwards does God reveal to them. Kol zeh kedei laharbot scharan, to increase their reward. V'chein el aretz asher areka, to the land I will show you. V'chein miyona ukra lecha takriya. and you'll tell them in Nineveh the proclamation that I will tell you. So that's what we're being taught here. That's the reason why it was delayed. Okay, now up to verse 3. We're in chapter 22 of Bereshit, verse 3. We're going through the story of the near sacrifice of Isaac, of Yitzchak, the Akeidah, the binding of Yitzchak. Vayashkem Avram Baboker. Abraham wakes up early in the morning. Vayachavosh et chamaro. He saddles his donkey. Okay? Abraham wakes up early and saddles his donkey. That's what we're supposed to be doing every morning. We're supposed to wake up early in the morning to serve Hashem. Abraham takes with him the two young men, Yitzchak Beno and Yitzchak his son, and he splits the wood for the Olah offering. And he gets up and he goes to the place that God told him. Let's look at this powerful verse. Vayashkem, Abraham rose early. Rashi says, Nizdares lamitzvah. He was moved to zealously perform this mitzvah. Nizdares lamitzvah. Vayachavosh et chamaro. He saddled his donkey. Rashi says, Hu ba'atzmo. He did it himself. He didn't command one of his slaves to do it. One of my favorite lines. This is a line from the Midrash. Love mikalkelet interrupts the line. Meaning to say, when people are in love, they don't act normally. They deviate. They act from emotion and not from the rational. And so Abraham didn't have to saddle his own donkey. He had servants who worked for him who could do that. Why didn't Abraham do it himself? Why did Abraham do it himself? Because he was in love with God. And so therefore it says, that Abraham loved God, and when you're in love, you don't act in the normal manner. You change the way you normally act. And he takes Shnei Narav. He takes his two young lads with him. What does that mean? Who are these two young men? Yishmael and Elazar. He takes Yishmael and Eliezer. These are the two men who are taken with. Yishmael is his son, and Eliezer is his servant. And why is Eliezer being called a young man? Because he must have been very old, Eliezer, at this point. Because according to Rashi, Isaac was 37. If we go with that approach, then Eliezer was the one who discovered Isaac's wife after this. So Eliezer must have been at least a decade older. Why are you calling him Nar? And also, Ishmael is 13 years older than Isaac. So therefore, or 14 years older. So therefore, Ishmael is over 50. He's older than me. Yet he's being called a young man. He takes his two young men with him. So the commentaries explain that earlier in the Bible, the word Nar refers to Eliezer and to Ishmael. And why does he have to take these young men with him? Because at the end, we're going to see that Abraham ascends the mountain with just Isaac. He has to have, a person has to have two people accompanying you when you go out on the road. Why? In case one of them has to go to the bathroom, you have the other one to be there with him. Okay. And he split the wood for the Olah. Rashi says, Targum Vitsalach. He split. Kemod v'tzalchu Yarden, Lashon bikuah, fender in French. He splits it in French. Okay. We'll do one more verse and I'll pause to see if anybody has any questions before we go on. I'm just going to pause after we do this next verse. Vayom HaShlishi, and it was on the third day. Vayisa Avraham esinav, and Abraham lifts up his eyes. Vayaris hamakom merachok. It was on the third day, and Abraham raised up his eyes, and he saw the place from far away. So they've been traveling for 3 days. Rashi says, Lama ichar milaroso miyad. Why did God hold off from showing Abraham immediately? So Rashi explains a very powerful answer. Kedei shelo yomru, so that they shouldn't say hamamo v'ir bevu pitom. We don't want anybody to think, oh, he made this decision suddenly, that Abraham didn't have time to think it through. Like they say, that there was that Harry Truman had a rule that he wouldn't send his letter. If he had an angry letter, he'd wait at least 3 days before sending it. So to make sure that was what he really felt. So here too, God wanted Abraham to be able to say, I thought about this. I didn't just do it quickly. But if we don't want people to say, if only Abraham had time to think about it, I'll say that he wouldn't have done it. So that's why it says he did it on the third day. Vayaris hamakom, and he saw the place from far away. So I've always loved this Rashi, because what does it mean? Ra'a anan kashur al-ahar. He saw, how did he know which was the place? He saw there was a cloud affixed to the mountain, and that's how he knew it was the place. But I also think, like here, there was no place, literally. God didn't tell him which place. He said, you'll find the place. It was almost like God gave the freedom to Abraham to discover the place that he was supposed to go to. Because God was giving so precise. He was commanding Abraham to do something so monumentally intense. You think God could have given him the place. No, but God gives us the space to find the place. Doesn't always tell us the exact place. Sometimes we want answers. We want answers for everything. We want direction. But no, sometimes God will not give us the exact answer. We have to find it on ourselves. Just want to pause here for a moment in case anybody has any questions. Going right back to the verses that we're discussing. Vayomer Avram el Ne'arav, Abraham says to the 2 lads that are with him, Shvu lachem pom chamor, you 2 remain here with the donkey. Vani vanar nelcha ako. And so, by the way, Charlotte, this is for you also. He says, I and the young man will return to here. V'nishtachaveh, I and the young man will go to here. V'nishtachaveh v'nashuva alechem. And we will bow down and we will return to you. Rashi says, what do you mean we will return? Nitnabe sheyashuvu shneim. He prophesied that both of them would return. So Abraham was saying, we'll be back. We will come back to you. That means to say he understood he wasn't really going to slaughter Isaac. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said, we'll come back to you. Now he said, you stay. Me and the lad will go up until here. We'll go to the place that was before us. Alternatively, Rashi says, the Midrash, it means ad ko ereh hechanhu. I'll see where he is. Masha amrli amakom ko yezeracha. I'll see where it is, this place that God said to me, so shall your offspring be. Meaning Abraham was saying, I'll see how God's prophecy will come true. So that's another way to understand it. So now, the verse says, verse 6. Now it should say, I don't think my father's on. Hold on. Yeah. So, verse 6, it states, Vayikach Avraham et atzei olah. You just say, my father is not on. I don't know if my father is on the Zoom today, but he told me my father prayed in the west side at the Moriah synagogue. He said when the person would read this passage, it was a room full of Holocaust survivors. When they would read this passage of the Akeidah, the entire room would burst out in tears when he said the first word. That the person who read it with such emotion and from the life experiences that there was all these emotions brought to life that everybody could feel it, and they burst out in tears. They just burst out in tears. So now, verse 6, Vayikach Abraham et atzei. Abraham took the wood for the offering. Vayasem al Yitzchak beno. He placed it on Isaac his son. Vayikach biado es ha'esh ves ha'macheles. He took in his hand the fire and the knife. He took in his hand the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked together. A very powerful verse. Abraham takes the wood for the offering, and Rashi focuses on the ma'acheles, a very unusual word for a knife. Usually, a knife is called a sakin. Rashi says that here it's called a ma'achelet sakin al shem she'ochelet basar, because it's called a knife. It's called a ma'achelet because it eats the flesh. V'charbi tochal basar. My sword shall eat the flesh. V'shemachsheret basar la'achila, prepares the flesh for eating. Which is strange, but it's like the text is highlighting the graphic, bloody nature of this action. Alternatively, zot nikret machelet al shem sheYisrael ochlim matan schara. This is called machelet because Israel is eating its rewards, meaning to say, we're still being rewarded for the dedication that was shown in this passage. And now we read this phrase, Vayelchu shneim yachdav, both of them walk together. Rashi says, Avram knew that he was going to slaughter his son. He was going with joy and eagerness, like Isaac. Isaac was unaware. Now this is Rashi's reading, that Isaac is completely unaware. Not everybody agrees, and one of the questions is, was Isaac unaware? Was Isaac unaware? And if he was unaware at this point, was he unaware in the next verse? And it's a real question if Isaac was unaware. At some point, Isaac had to be aware. When he was tied down, he was aware. When he starts asking, where's the lamb? He was aware, and that's the next verse. So why is Rashi saying he was unaware? But that's Rashi's reading. Again, very emotional reading. So, and all of a sudden, right after Rashi says he's unaware, the next verse tells us, Vayomer Yitzchak el Avram aviv. Isaac says to his father Abraham, Vayomer Avi, says my father, and he says, I'm here, my son. Vayomer Hineni b'ni, I'm here, my son. So he says, Vayomer Hinei ha'esh v'ha'etzim, v'yeyaseh. We have the fire and the wood. Where's the lamb? Where's the lamb? So Abraham's response is also so poetic and powerful. He doesn't lie. Vayomer Avram Elokim yirelo aseh v'olah b'ni v'yalchu shneim yachdav. He said, God will show us the lamb for an olah, my son. And the two walk together. But here too, Rashi has a very, very nuanced reading of the text. Rashi says, Elokim Yireh Aseh. God will show us the lamb. Komar Yerev Yivcharlo Haseh. God will select for himself what the lamb will be. V'im ein seh le'olabini. If there's no lamb, you'll be the Olah, my son. Rashi said it's as though Rashi is telling him because it's as though Abraham is telling him because Abraham's words could be read as saying, "My son will be the Olah if you have no choice." So, and now Rashi says all of a sudden Isaac understands. At this point, Isaac understands. That's what Rashi says. Isaac understands, and he still walks together with equanimity, with an equal heart. So that's how Rashi reads it. Isaac first didn't understand, and then he understood. So Rashi has basically said a powerful idea. God didn't tell him to sacrifice, and also Abraham didn't withhold the truth from Isaac. He told him. So this is how he rehabilitates Abraham and God. That's how Rashi reads this passage. I want to stop here. I want to say, first of all,